So, a little about me. My name is Valerie Dominy. I came into teaching in 2018 as an alternative certification teacher, and I thought I was going to kill it. I found out pretty quickly that I did not know as much as I thought I did, even though I had completed a program and had my degree. I was told in my first year as an English 1 teacher that I needed to stay in alignment with the TEKS. I had never heard that acronym before, did not know what it stood for. And finally, after enough no's or questions of does it align with the TEKS, is it in the TEKS, I decided to do some research and take a deep dive and found out what they are. I think this is critical information for teachers in the classroom to be successful and be able to create engaging lessons that meet their students where they're at and also maintain alignment with our state standards. So I became very passionate about this. I decided to start my own business called The Highest Standard, and I now develop professional development courses to help other teachers really be able to stay in the profession and not experience burnout. I know I want to leave the classroom about once a week, and I would really like to ensure other teachers have the tools necessary to get past those burnout feelings and be able to be successful as a teacher in their curriculum and content and classroom. So I do find it important to talk about my why. I know as teachers that can be a little bit of triggering jargon for us, but if you keep it in perspective in the right way, it is pretty helpful. I had a lot of really great influential teachers throughout my public school career, and they are the reason I decided to pursue education as my second career option. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to have the impact that they had on me on other students. So I'm talking third grade Miss Carney and junior high Mr. Riddle and high school Mr. Schaefer. You just have those teachers that you will never forget and those moments in the classroom that may not be fully education based, but you remember those times because it stuck, because they created good relationships and crafted lessons that were just on point with what their students were interested in. So that's my big why behind the scenes. I've always played teacher. I'm the oldest of 3 girls, so we played school back before technology was a thing because that was something fun to do to fill our time. And it really is a heart-centered career for me. So I like to share the why. I'm going to dig into the why of the TEKS during this presentation. So it just seems fitting to give you that behind the scenes and humanize myself a little bit more for you guys. All right, so a little background information about this PD before we jump into the thick of it. I'm going to focus on the what, why, and how of the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. As a new or alternative certification teacher, you probably feel quite thrown to the wolves and a bit overwhelmed. The first couple of years are pretty stressful, and I want to make sure that we empower our rookies. That way, they're able to effectively use them, develop lessons and assessments, and ensure student growth and success while remaining in alignment with the TEKS. All right, teachers, you know how this goes. We're going to start with a pre-test. It's very quick, easy to fill out. It's going to take you just a couple of seconds. And then you'll do the same thing at the end of this 45-minute course, and we will see how much you've grown. Table of contents page. This just gives you a brief outline of what we will be covering. The first thing is just jumping into the TEKS. What are they? Then we're going to talk about why we have them and understanding their framework. Then we will jump into how to use them. We will focus on aligning your curriculum and instruction, and then do some lesson plan writing. You will work on writing your own LOCOs, or language objective content objectives, success criteria, whatever your campus wants to call them. Then we will conclude and wrap it up. You'll finish that post assessment and give me the information needed to get your credit for this. Module 1, what are the TEKS? Where do we find them? And how are they used?
So, most important question of this course, what are the TEKS? TEKS is an acronym. It stands for Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. And these are our educational standards in the state of Texas. Basically, what they tell us is what students in Texas should know and be able to do in each grade and course. It's the material that we need to cover, ideally to mastery for each of our students to be able to move on to the next course or next grade. Important thing to cover is where do we find our TEKS and ensure that they're updated. I have a really cool resource to use, but TEA's website is the best place to go and make sure that all of your TEKS are there in one place and up to date. So if you look on the screen, I've got a link here for it. You will be able to click that and it'll take you directly to the website. And once you're in there, it is broken down by chapter and goes into subjects, and that opens up and gives you even more to narrow down specifically to your course and grade level. Next
Hi,
up, let's talk
everybody, and
about how the
welcome to
TEKS are
Tackling the TEKS.
organized. The
This
first
course
way
is
that they
designed
organize
specifically for
them
new and
is by
alternative
grade level.
certification
So all
teachers
the
in
way from
Texas
pre-K
who
now
are
through
struggling to
12th grade,
understand the
every
foundation
single
of our
grade and
education
each course
system.
in those
At the end of
grades
this
has
45 minutes, you
TEKS.
will have
Then
much
they
better
divide it by
footing and
subject area once you
understand the
get into
who,
those
what, and
secondary
whys
levels.
of
So the big
creating curriculum
categories
for
like
your
math,
classes,
science, social
what you
studies,
decide to
CTE,
teach,
English.
how
So
you can
that
design the
department.
lessons, and ensuring that
Then
they are all
underneath that will
aligned to
be
our
the
state
domain. So
standards.
each one of those courses
Hi,
has
everybody,
domains
and
in
welcome
there,
to
whether that's,
Tackling the
say,
TEKS.
English,
This
reading,
course is
writing,
designed
or if we're
specifically
in
for
math,
new and
numbers and
alternative certification
operation,
teachers
there's
in
different
Texas
categories
who
for
are
that
struggling
subject.
to
And then
understand
finally,
the
we get
foundation of our
to the
education
strands.
system.
And
At the
this
end
is
of this
where the meat
45
of it is.
minutes,
This
you
is
will
what
have
we
much
really
better
focus on
footing
as the
and
teachers. And
understand
these
the
are the
who, what, and
specific pieces of
whys of
information
creating
that
curriculum for
our
your
students
classes,
should
what you
master.
decide to
They should be
teach,
able to
how you can
understand
design the
what it is
lessons,
to the
and
point
ensuring that
of
they are all
exhibiting
aligned
that
to our
understanding
state
by creating
standards.
something or taking an
Hi,
assessment.
everybody, and
And then we
welcome
get to
to
move on
Tackling the
to the next
TEKS.
TEKS. Now we are going to take a peek at a specific course. So once you're on TEA's website and you have navigated to the point that you can open your course, you'll have to scroll and find the title of it. I teach business. Underneath that one, we have BIM 1, BIM 2, Principles of Business, Career Preparation, all kinds of other options. So first I need to narrow down the course title. If you see here under Rule, it will have the name, Business Information Management 1. So make sure you're in the correct course. The first thing it'll cover for A are the general requirements. It lets me know what grade levels this class is for. If there are any prerequisites, like with BIM 2, you have to complete BIM 1 first. Then it moves in and gives me some breakdown on the background of this course. What department does it fall under? In this one, it's CTE. What career choices could our students be pursuing? And then what is that overall zoomed out look at the class? This one discusses the fact that they're going to be learning software and soft skills for the workplace. Then we finally get into the knowledge and skills. These are the strands, as I was referring to in the last video. This is the meat. This is what we have to teach the students and make sure they are able to master and complete. It varies by every course. This one, this is strand 1. They always start with a number. And underneath strand 1 are letters A through F. So strand 1 focuses on professional standards for BIM. And underneath professional standards, they have to be able to do all of these things. So communicate effectively with others, demonstrate collaboration skills. These are things that I may not be able to teach in isolation. I can't just teach them collaboration. I might be having them collaborate on a project for Microsoft Excel. So then I'm hitting this strand as well as the ones that would be under Excel. So that's more of a complicated look at it using more than one. But as you become more of a veteran teacher, you're going to understand that we don't really ever teach these in isolation unless it's a really, really dense subject that needs our full attention and focus. Outside of that, we will probably pair these with others. And the more familiar you get with your TEKS, the better you're going to be able to assess, is this one that needs to be in isolation, or can I pair this with another TEKS in the course to cover it? The idea is through TEA that we cover every single one of the TEKS for our course in that year and course subject. It's not easy. They say that these will be concise, and most of them are not. There's a lot of technical jargon. It takes a lot to break them down, which we'll look at that process. But at least now you know how to find your specific course and make sure that you have access to your specific strands. I wanted to take a quick moment and expand on the background information included in the TEKS. As a first year and even second year teacher, I did not realize that this portion of the TEKS existed. And it's a really good starting spot, especially if it's your first year to teach a subject, to kind of understand where students are coming from and where they should be able to go when they finish your class. This helps a ton with planning. As teachers, most of the time, we are planning from our end goal and working backwards so that we can make sure students achieve that mark. The example that I have in here is from the business information management class. It talks to me about what the focuses are: planning, organizing, directing, evaluating. And then once I'm in that, it breaks down that they need these interpersonal skills, that they need to be able to transition either to the workforce or education. They also need to have technical skills. And then below that, it also gives me extracurricular suggestions for my students. I had no idea what a CTSO is. Depending on what type of teacher you are, what subject you're in, you may not either, but it is an extracurricular activity and club or organization for our career and technical education students to participate in competition wise. So there's all kinds of stuff you can learn about your course and the offerings for it by looking at this background information. It also breaks down the writing of the TEKS, and it lets you know that the words, the ones that contain the word including, reference content that must be mastered, while those containing the phrase such as are intended as possible illustrative examples. So content wise, if it says the word including, you have to cover every single thing underneath that number strand. So the A, B, C, D, E, F, including all of them. If it says such as, it is now giving you suggestions for, hey, you could show them how to do this by using this or this. But if it says including, you're going to have to cover those separately and make sure that students are able to master each individual TEKS. For the sake of time, since I can't take you to the other website on TEA and show you what these look like, this is what the strands look like beyond just that first one. Most courses have somewhere in like the 10 to 15 strand range, and under each of the numbers, there are a certain amount of letters. So it's hefty what you have for every course, but you do get a school year to cover that material. Zooming in on a strand. I highly recommend after this course that you go through the same process, but with the TEKS from your class so that you can work through this and really zoom in and understand what it is you are covering and teaching in your class. I'm still using the business information management TEKS. I have zoomed in on strand 6A. So that's how you say it for those newbies out there. I did not know this lingo when I started as a teacher. So you refer to it as 6A. If I were talking about one under 8 and it was the letter E, I would say strand 8E. And then people know where to go to navigate to in their TEKS so that they can see which one you're talking about. This one says the student applies word processing technology. The student is expected to identify customary styles of business documents. So this specific strand, this one strand, is exactly what I will be using to develop a lesson to teach my students. My goal as their teacher is to develop activities, lessons, assessments that are going to measure their mastery of this specific skill. So I'm only going to be measuring word processing, which would be like Microsoft Word, and customary styles of business documents. And they only have to be able to identify them. So I have to make sure that I stay within that scope to ensure that I am in. Time for a shameless plug. And actually, it's going to help you just as much as it has helped me. So, through my years of being a teacher, I've had lots of different TEKS that I've had to teach, and they are all very hefty, as I've shown you, and as you've probably seen by clicking through your own at this point. And I got tired of doing this and having to flip and find and search and discover. And then, of course, I'd spill coffee or I'd lose my paper because we're constantly busy. So I wanted them all in one place where I was able to see them on a spread and see the different strands and categories and then be able to use that to help with my planning. So I have designed and created what I am calling a TEKS table mat. So all of your TEKS for one course in one place. If you have a class that has longer TEKS, it would also use the back side. I print these on 11 by 17 paper in color. They're separated by strands based on the color boxes. So strand 1, 2, 3, 4. And then under each one are all of the letters within each strand. I update these annually for any changes that may come through. And this makes it easy for you to find. You can keep up with it if something spills. You can also use a dry erase marker. I've got one right here, so I'll show you guys, so that you're able to write and mark it up as needed during your planning. And then you can just erase and start over for the next week. It's a very convenient tool. It's helped me a lot rather than flipping, to be able to have them all in one place, especially when you get to the point of planning where you are using more than one strand and you want to be able to see them all to write your lesson plans and keep them in front of your face. So if you'd like to order one, use the QR code on the screen. Make sure to include all of your information, and I can get that to you as quick as possible. We are now at the end of Module 1. You should be able to answer the essential question of what are the TEKS and where do you find them? I'm not going to answer it here. I want to make sure to provide time for discussion if you're doing this in a class setting. So please talk amongst yourself. Make sure you understand what the TEKS are. Use your own words for it to really own it and solidify that learning. And then talk about where you find them. Your homework for this module will be to find your TEKS in that super secret place that I've told you about, and ideally order your TEKS table mat. That way you don't have to worry about going and finding them and flipping through that packet of papers that you'll inevitably lose and destroy at some point anyways. Get ready for Module 2. Module 2, Analyzing TEKS Standards. We have the what and the where. Now we need the how. So we're going to talk about how to deconstruct the TEKS standards. Before jumping into the how, let's take a quick minute and talk about why the TEKS were created. A lot of veteran teachers get frustrated by the TEKS because it feels as though we do not have autonomy in creating lessons and activities and figuring out what to teach our students. And that's just not true. The intention was good. What happened is that the Texas State Board of Education wanted to make sure that we had a consistent and rigorous curriculum across the state, ensuring equal access to education for all of our students. So clearly an important reason, right? They wanted to make sure that no matter where a student goes to school, that they are going to learn about theme at the secondary level, that they are going to learn about the quadratic formula. So it gives us these foundational pieces of you have to make sure that they know this by the end of the year. It is not telling you how to teach your students. It is telling you what to teach your students. And that's to make sure that they have the same education no matter where they are in the state of Texas. The best step, tackling the TEKS. This is where I came up with the name. This is exactly why I built the course, but this is also the most confusing aspect of this entire concept. So we are going to spend the bulk of time on this portion of the course. Tackling the TEKS consists of 4 steps. The first is focusing on one individual strand. This is not a time where you compare them. Second is finding the verb in that strand. The third is identifying the key concepts and skills that will be specific to that course. And the fourth one is analyzing the progression. That means, where do we want our students to land at the end? What level of thinking, what depth of thinking do the students need to be focusing on to master this standard? We're first going to talk about the individual strands. So under each standard, which are those numbers, there are specific strands, which are the letters. These standards are typically concise statements. And when I say concise, sometimes that is, they take that and run with it. And they're not as concise as what the word concise means, but we'll take what we can get. They describe what students should know and should be able to do. And this time we're going to take one standard at a time. As an example, I am now using the Cosmetology 1, and I'm looking at strand 2B. So 2 is the student applies academic skills to the field of cosmetology. The student is expected to, and now we're talking about B, identify body tissues, body systems, and their functions. So even though this is one individual strand, as you can see, there is a lot to it, okay? It is not just applying academic skills to the field of cosmetology. It is specifically identifying three different big things: body tissues, body systems, and then their functions. Okay, so even within that one strand, I can separate those and do just the body tissue, just the body systems, and then focus on what their functions are because they first have to identify them. So, as you can see, as concise as it is, there's still quite a bit to it, which is important that we focus in and take and tackle apart each individual strand. Best part about teaching adults, I don't have to explain what a verb is. Step 2 is identifying the verb in your strand. So if you move down to the letter portion, it says identify body tissues, body systems, and their functions. Identify is our verb here. And most of the time, that is where your verb will show up, is right after that letter, and it lets you know what your students should be able to do, which is exactly what a verb is, just in case you forgot and your brain has become mush because you're with students all the time. Step 3, key concepts. This is our technical jargon, the language for that course content. So in this case, it's the academic skills for cosmetology, and content-wise, they're focused on body tissue, body systems, and their functions. These key concepts are what I use to let me know what I need to plan to teach them. I know based off of this that my lesson needs to be teaching them body tissue, body systems, and their functions. And the final step of tackling the TEKS is focusing on the progression. How are we going to get the students from this is what you're going to learn to this is what I learned? So I like following the layout of I do, we do, you do, and give them that gentle release. If this isn't something that you've heard about yet as a teacher, do some research on it. This really helped me in laying out all of my lessons moving forward and giving me a purpose and a way to put it all together. So the I do portion is for the teacher. I will be teaching the lesson. I will be using visuals. I will do the labeling. I'm going to be completely modeling it for them. The we do is now I'm going to include them in it. So I can either have them work with a shoulder partner, or maybe we do a class popcorn activity of some sort, or each person comes up and puts a label on the board to help complete the diagram. It's something involved, so it's not completely on one individual student. They get help, but now they are doing the work. And the final step is the you do. This is where it's completely the individual student. We now need to assess them. Are they getting it? And we love the does not meet, meets, and masters. Ideally, we are getting them all to masters, but we need them to at least meet before we can even consider moving on. So this would be your activity, your individual work, where you give them the paper to label the body tissue, where they do a drag and drop that's interactive in their online course. But it's being done solo by the individual student so that you can assess where they stand on that standard. We are now at the end of Module 2. You should be able to answer the question of why were the TEKS created? So make sure you talk with the people around you or whoever you can and lock that learning in. Have that discussion like we encourage our students to do. Why were the TEKS created? And your homework, ask a veteran teacher which 3 TEKS they cover most often in that subject. Take time and tackle those TEKS. Look those strands up. Focus on the verb. Isolate the key concepts. Look at how you would handle the progression of this. How are you going to get your students from you've told us what it is to I know what it is? Module 3, now that we know what the TEKS are and where to find them, we are going to talk about how we use them correctly. We're going to talk about aligning curriculum and instruction by diving into the role of TEKS in assessment and focusing specifically on Bloom's or DOK, which means depth of knowledge. I understand how many acronyms are in all of this stuff. It's part of being a teacher, guys. It comes with the package.
STAR test. How does hearing that make you feel? It might make you feel a little bit better after this presentation because at least you will understand why it exists. So, the State Board of Education and TEA create these TEKS, our Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, to ensure all of our kids get the same access to a rigorous curriculum no matter where they're at in the state. Well, the way they hold us accountable as teachers and assess whether or not we are covering all of those standards is by testing our students. They test the students on these same standards and determine, do they really master it, or are the teachers just saying that they are? Now, I understand the frustration being the fact that we can't control every student and their effort. And I completely agree that it is not a fair assessment of our ability to teach. But understanding the intention behind it, the checks and balances concept of the system, does make it a little less infuriating that it's there. It is supposed to be there intentionally to make sure that we are following through and using those as our foundation and guideline for the curriculum in our classroom. So even though you may not have students master, if they at least meet or approach meets, they can tell that you have been covering that content in your classroom. So this is just a look at understanding how the TEKS play into student assessment. The STAR is obviously the end all be all of standardized testing. But of course, we have unit tests and CBAs and other assessments along the way that we should be using the TEKS to test and make sure the students understand the overall concept and not just the one lesson or two lessons that we teach on the topic, that they can apply it to other, let's say English class, they can apply it to another text. It's a transferable skill. Bloom's taxonomy. This is the ultimate of jargon when it comes to education and psychology. It's been around for quite a while. It was originally thought of by Mr. Benjamin Bloom, who's over here next to me on the slide. He was an educational psychologist. He was also the chair of committee of educators at the University of Chicago. AKA, he knew what he was talking about. And he came up with the concept that in order for us to reach a level of creating in education, we have to start at the bottom of remembering and then build upon that knowledge until we're able to reach that tip top and create our own works of literature or art or science or whatever it may be that they would then create because they know all of the other things about it. So he classifies these learning objectives, or we use Bloom's taxonomy. He doesn't. We use what he created to classify the learning objectives for our students. And this language is exactly what we see in our TEKS. So we're able to see what the standard says, align it with this beautiful, colorful triangle that's on the screen, and then we know what level of learning our students are at. And the whole concept behind it is that there's no way that we will be able to ask them to apply their learning until they have mastered remembering it and understanding their learning. It's a very similar process to what I am doing with this lesson. I want to make sure that first you remember what TEKS are, where to find them. Then I want you to understand why they exist. And now we're going to get into the part of applying it to the state standards and being able to create lessons from that. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more. Why blooms? Out of all the different strategies out there, all of the different research that's been done, why do we go with Bloom's taxonomy? It has stood the test of time. Even if you refer to it as DOK or depth of knowledge, it's the same concept. We are building upon prior learning. And as you see on the board here, there's a bunch of educational trigger words: scaffold, curriculum, alignment. By using Bloom's taxonomy, we are able to hit all of these marks. We can scaffold the learning because we're looking at different levels of complexity. We can build that enrichment and move upon levels. Curriculum design, it makes it way easier when we have Bloom's taxonomy. I know based off of that verb in the TEKS where I am starting design-wise for curriculum. Am I starting at that remembering level, or should they already have that and I just need to do a refresh of remembering, understand, and we're straight into the applying? This is particularly true when it comes to our CTE courses, where they go from welding 1 to welding 2, where welding 1 is memorizing the names of the tools, all the safety procedures, and welding 2, they finally get to create stuff. So you just have to pay attention. It does help you design your curriculum for your course by paying attention to those verbs and where they fall in that triangle. And then assessment alignment. What is it that I'm asking the students to do at the end? What should they have mastered? What can they now show me that they learned? Is it that they can apply? Is it that they can analyze? Can they now create their own piece of welded equipment? It's not my area of expertise, but you get where I'm going with it. Can they write their own book? Can they create their own math problem? That's a big thing in math I remember doing. It's just a different level of learning to get to that creation part. So we need to make sure that assessment wise, we are assessing them based off of what we taught them. Did we teach them how to apply? We need to assess them on how they are able to apply. Here's the triangle. This is what it looks like. It is 6 different levels. Some triangles have different colors, so don't pay attention so much to the color as you do the content of the triangle. So we start at the bottom and move our students upwards to the top. As you can see over on this side of the screen, there's lower order and higher order. That is split right here between applying and analyzing. So we consider remembering, understanding, and applying as lower order thinking skills, and analyzing, evaluating, and creating as higher order thinking skills. So again, like I was saying with those CTE courses, for those first courses, cosmetology one, they're going to be learning about the body tissues and being able to label it. They're not going to be touching them. But then when we go up to analyzing, evaluating, creating, and even some in applying, that's where they start to, right? Then they actually get to do some hands-on activities. But first, they have to know the bottom of the triangle before they move upwards to that tip top. In a usual professional development course, they would read you all of these words that are on the board. But I'm going to respect the fact that you guys are educated individuals and let you read through this on your own time. I do have resources coming soon where you could have these in a flippable document at your desk so that you're able to turn to the page if you know that you're doing level 3 applying as a lesson and you need ideas. That is what these keywords are supposed to be used for. So if you know that your TEK says students will apply their understanding of labeling skin tissue or what the skin tissue organs are, then you could go here and help brainstorm ideas for lessons and assessments. You could ask them to investigate. You could ask them to categorize. You could ask them to deconstruct, right? Like take it apart and then be able to put it back together. So this is meant to help your brain come up with engaging lesson ideas, good assessments that you know are going to assess the level of blooms that TEKS standard is sitting at, to make sure what you are teaching the students is what you are assessing the students on. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. It's because of Bloom's taxonomy. I had to take a pause to giggle at myself after that. As I was doing my research into what the TEKS were, how Bloom's tied into it, and trying to make sense of this educational system, I realized I needed a real world example to understand it. We do this with our students. It's proven through neuroscience and research that if we have a personal connection to make to a topic, we are going to retain and understand that information more. So I wanted to make sure to give you guys an example of Bloom's at work. And if you do it properly and build upon it, it will create this top level of learning for our students. So what better way than talking about our ABCs? Think of that lower level. The first thing we start with is remembering it, where our parents, usually it's before kindergarten and daycare, whoever it may be, is singing us that song. We learn to sing it with them, start with a couple letters, and then usually by the time kindergarten rolls around, we can recite it without thinking twice. I can still sing it. It's not one that you forget, right? So once we remember those letters, then we can start to understand. That's when we start listening to someone read to us. Maybe we start writing our letters for our name. We start to make the connection that, oh, this song is there and those letters exist, and they are also in what I read, and I need them for when I write. Only once we remember them and understand their purpose can we move on to applying. And that's when we will start to read and start to write. You start with those lower level books where you point your finger at the first word and then sound out the rest of it, right? And all you do is write your name or at, cat, sat. So very lower level, but we're starting that application process. Once we get to a point of mastery for that, where we can read and write pretty fluently and cohesively, we will move on to analyzing. This is when you hit like that middle school age and you start to look at Charlotte's Web. And instead of saying, well, it's just a bunch of barn animals and they're talking to each other, no, we understand that there is deeper meaning in that, that they are looking at friendship and differences and how people interact with each other and need one another, right? This is that analysis. We can look at those deeper meaning of the words in that abstract sense because we get their literal sense and purpose. It is very difficult to make that jump if I didn't remember, understand, and apply before I tried to analyze. After we start looking at the deeper meaning of words, then we can begin to evaluate it. This is where we get to come up with our own opinion about what we are reading or what we are writing, because we have enough knowledge at this point to comprehend those deeper meanings. Okay. And then that final part of it is creating. Now you are an avid reader, you're a writer, you make original works, whether that's essays in school or you become a published author in the future. That never would have happened if you didn't just remember your ABCs. And we are at the end of module 3. The question you should be able to answer right now is, why do we teach using blooms? Your homework for this activity will be to look through your TEKS for your class and see what levels of blooms are included. Are you more of an introductory course that has lower level thinking, or are you a second or third year course that focuses on the higher level thinking?
Module 4, our very last module. At this point, the only thing that we are going to focus on is putting everything together. How does finding the TEKS for our course align with breaking them down, align with finding the blooms and depth of knowledge, and turning that into a lesson plan that we can use in class with our students? So our example TEKS for this one, I pulled from Introduction to Welding just to ensure that we've got some different options here. We're going to focus on 3B. The student evaluates the function and application of the tools, equipment, technologies, and materials used in welding. The student is expected to identify and properly dispose of environmentally hazardous materials used in welding. Again, they tell us these are concise, and we see they are not. So let's tackle this TEK.
Okay, so tackling a TEK consists of 3 main parts. The first one is identifying the verb. That means what the student should do. What are they actually doing? What is the action? So in this TEKS for welding, it's asking them to identify and properly dispose of. So they're going to have to know both. They have to identify and name them, and they have to know how to properly dispose of whatever it is they identified and named. The second step is isolating the content. That means looking at the nouns and the phrases that follow this verb, okay? So we know what it is they're focusing on. And for this, it is environmentally hazardous materials that are used in welding. So that's kind of the what. What is it that we're covering content-wise? This is what our teachers really know. Those who come in that are welders, they know this. But putting together these LOCOs and the verbs and how students should start at this level of learning, that's where it gets confusing. So they have to identify and properly dispose of environmentally hazardous materials used in welding. The final part of tackling this TEK is determining the cognitive demand. That's a fancy educational jargon term for talking about their depth of knowledge, DOK, or using blooms, which I prefer because it's a triangle and it's leveled learning, and that's easier for my brain to comprehend. So on this one, the word is identify. I know based off of my knowledge of blooms that means it is a lower level order of thinking. It's actually level 1, which is just remembering. I don't need them to understand why they exist at this point. I certainly do not need them out there playing with these hazardous materials. I need them to be able to identify, that they can recall, that they can name, that they can label on those basic bottom level of remembering. So by figuring this stuff out, it's going to lead me to come up with, okay, what lessons and activities do I need to come up with to make sure that they can identify it? I just named some things like recall, label. Maybe I'm going to put pictures of them out and do a gallery walk so that students can go around and see the pictures of the things and put the name of it with it. Okay, very simple stuff, right? Same with properly dispose of. Maybe we get to that level once they know what the names of the stuff is, then they can go around and label how do you properly dispose of it. I'm sure it's not dumping it in an ocean, right? So they're going to learn things like that that will be important for their job since they will be handling these materials. And OSHA is kind of a big deal. So this is how I kind of break it down backwards and give myself some understanding of where do I even start in how I'm going to teach this to the students. Like that's a lot. I remember learning those things. It's OSHA, it's serious. Where do I start? Well, you start by realizing all they have to do is remember. Okay. These are definitions. It's recall. It's basic level of understanding. There's no way they're going to be playing with these products and disposing of them if they can't remember the names of them. So now that I understand where it is on blooms, we're going to jump in and look at a resource that could be really helpful for you in figuring out what words to use in aligning your LOCOs. All right, so the main reason we zoom in on blooms and understanding what level our students' learning needs to be on is so that we can align our assessment. We have to make sure that we have taught to mastery or at least meets so that the majority of the students understand the concept before we move on to add to that layer of learning. And that's the beautiful way for it to work, right? So the assessment needs to measure the student's ability to remember and the concepts covered remember the concepts covered during this lecture, class discussion, and activities. So I need to assess, can they remember the names of these materials and how to properly dispose of them? There's this really cool flip book, quick flip for questions on using Bloom's taxonomy because these adjectives are what's used in and throughout our Texas TEKS. I've used this a lot. I'm going to flip screens here and show it to you on this Amazon link. I will link that in the comments or in the description for this video so that you're able to go find it. But it's really nice. It has questions in there that you can flip to and come up with something that you can ask your students then and there for that lesson. You don't have to overthink it. Eventually, you'll have this entire thing memorized. It's a really nice resource. So some of those question stems that you can find within this under that level 1 remembering would be what is, and then you insert the name of that hazardous material. Match, which one has to be thrown away with a label on it. Okay, I'm coming up with welding stuff. They should have to do that. Can you recall? Can you list 3 items, the top 3 most hazardous materials? When did this, et cetera, et cetera? You can come up with these by just having these question stems. So not every assessment has to be a theatrical performance. You don't always have to have a 50 question multiple choice test with fill in the blank and short answer options. You can assess by just saying, okay, can they name 3 of them at the end of today? Then I know I can move on for tomorrow. Assessments can be quick and they don't always have to be graded. I know that's like the extra crazy thing, but they really don't have to be graded. So this is a nice, cheap resource for you to have at your disposal that matches up with those keywords you'll be looking for to figure out what level of assessment you will be on for your students. I'm just hopping on here quickly to read to you the words in bold and capital on this slide. Not every assessment needs to be a production. And I mean this, guys. You can take grades on very, very simple things. A 1 question exit ticket. It does not always have to be a production. Your job is to determine if your students are ready to move on to the next, more advanced topic in your classroom. All right, lesson plans, the demise of most first year teachers. I know my first year, I was so thankful for my mentor teacher, and we taught the exact same subject. We had the same schedule, and I would just copy and paste her lesson plans. I would read them, but most of it didn't make sense to me because there was so much technical language in it, and it was such a formulaic procedure. But it really is simple now that you understand where you're coming up with all of your content by having these TEKS for your classroom. So we're going to use those to come up with our language and content objective. I know different schools call them different things, but in the grand scheme of things, these are the two that they're asking for. So first, we're going to talk about the language objective, LO, if you will. I like to use language objective so that I remember what this one focuses on, and that is the fancy language from the TEKS. This is the one the administrators care about. This is the one that they will use to back you if you ever have someone say that you were not aligned with curriculum, that you were wild and out teaching your students whatever you wanted to. They will use your learning objective and show that it aligns with the TEKS to be able to back and support you. So using the fancy language from this same one we've been working on about properly disposing of environmentally hazardous materials, all we're going to do is put students will in front of all of the keywords from that. So students will identify and properly dispose of environmentally hazardous materials used in welding. That's what we're teaching them to do, right? We're not teaching them to play with them, right? They are identifying what they are and identifying how to properly dispose of them. And that's what they're going to do. Do not overthink your learning objective. It is your TEKS with students will in front of it because that is your goal. That is where you're headed. Okay, so the one that isn't exactly like the TEKS is the content objective, your CO, or success criteria. What it means, they are asking you what is actually happening in your classroom. What actionable items will the students complete to be able to master that learning objective? So if our learning objective is students will identify and properly dispose of environmentally hazardous materials in welding, then I know my students will first review what those materials are in welding, right? We're going to have to talk about what are they. Then I'm going to have them work with a shoulder partner to discuss the most common in the welding field. Then I'm going to have them participate in a class discussion about the proper disposal of materials. And finally, I will put together what we call a formative assessment. There's formative and summative. Summatives are tests, formatives are forming their learning. So a formative assessment that ties back to the strand. This is where I'll use that flip book, come up with how I'm going to assess them and figure out, do they have it? Showing that they can indeed identify and properly dispose of environmentally hazardous materials in welding. Maybe I'm going to have them complete this assignment in Canvas. I created a drag and drop matching to make sure that they know which ones are disposed of this way and what the name of the material is. But what your administrators are wanting to see here, what parents should see, what students should see in this content objective and success criteria is the roadmap of how you are going to get students from A, they just read students will identify and properly dispose of environmentally hazardous materials in welding, to Z, they actually can identify and know how to properly dispose of it, and they can prove it to you, okay, through an activity and assessment of some sort. You then use that data as proof of concept. They understand it. I can now move on and build on to this learning. So I do mine always as a bullet point list. I can't think of an administrator who would argue with this because it's clear, it's cohesive. You're telling me how you're getting students from square one to square whatever you have to land on. And again, not every TEK is taught in a day. Reviewing these maybe 1 to 2 days. I know in our classrooms we have 47 minutes, which means we really have 37 minutes between bell to bell with restroom breaks. So 25, 30 minutes to review these. How am I going to do that in a day? Then I'm going to move on to this shoulder partner, or maybe I'm able to pair both of those. We'll review it, and part of that review is shoulder partner, right? So I'm still using that I do, we do, you do model. So I will help them review it. They will work together. And then they will do individually. So I should see that layout in your content objective or success criteria. And that's all I'm going to leave you with on lesson planning and language and content objectives. It is a lot in your first couple of years to understand how to put this big puzzle together. But if you can get these two basics of your language and content objectives, and then the planning and aligning to the TEKS, at least you get that foundation. And your creativity and lessons and what works and what doesn't work is going to continue to grow as your schema, your experience in teaching grows, and you get to know your student body better, and you get to understand what resources you actually do have and lack of resources that you thought you would have. But if you can get this foundational concept, your administrators are going to be happy. Your heart and your brain and your nervous system will be happy because you understand what you're teaching and what the goal is for you and your students. So, a little closure and review here. I want you to think about the difference between language and content objectives. You should be able to walk away from this module understanding that basic concept. So, language, fancy language from the TEKS. We're not going to class it up. We're just going to say students will, and then I'm inserting those nouns, those adjectives, and that content jargon. Content objectives or success criteria is going to be what my students will actually do to be able to say that they mastered or met and truly understand that TEK. What process will I walk them through in my classroom? What activities will we be doing? What am I going to teach them? In what format? Where can they find it? All of those extra details will go into that. Remember, lean on the bullet point list. Talk to your administrator, talk to your team lead, show them this if you need to, because this is how you understand it, is to be able to bullet point out where am I starting with my students? How am I getting them all the way to the end so that I can prove they have mastered this concept so that we can move on. My suggestion to you is to complete this homework. Use that TEK that you selected at the beginning of the course. Go ahead and create an LOCO for your lesson. These are those bare bone portions that you can reuse year after year. And then you can come up with a different engaging activity, but at least you know the students will, right? And then I'm going to walk them through steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. And maybe I use a different book for it next year as an example, but the output, my input and their output is the same. You did it. You completed an hour of professional development, and I really hope that it helps you as a teacher, that you have found a little bit of footing, foundation, maybe an ounce of sanity to help keep you in the classroom and build that confidence as you grow as an educator, because I promise you, you will. These first few years are overwhelming. It's a lot of information. It's not at all what you signed up for, but it is doable. And the more that you understand the root and the whys behind the structure of the system, the more successful you will be within that system. So, as you leave this training, I just want to bring to your attention that this is now what I do for a living. I am a professional development company. It is called The Highest Standard. And I would love to have you guys participate in more of our trainings. This is just our free intro. I do have a Tackling the TEKS course that is 4 hours, far more comprehensive, far more hands-on digging into your TEKS. You will walk away having met the standards of the standards for your classroom if we go in the meets and masters categories. I also offer an 8-hour training for this, preferably in person for that one, where you will become a master of your TEKS. Then you will be able to go back and teach your other teachers how to tackle these appropriately, and ideally everyone walks around with confidence. I also have courses in trauma-informed teaching, culturally responsive teaching, simulating a work setting or makerspace, SPED department, and I am constantly adding to these and helping to build out custom courses. I am a CPE approved provider with Texas Education Agency. That means any courses you take with me, you will get CPE credit for. And teachers, you guys know we need 150 hours every 5 years to keep our teaching license. The school, most of the time, will help to cover expenses for these CPE courses as long as you can show them how it aligns with their goals and objectives as a campus, as a district, whatever those may be. You can find those on the website, talk to your team leads, talk to your mentor teachers, and find out how to show your administrators what type of professional development you need to develop professionally, because the gaps are different for each teacher. I hope this has been really helpful to you guys. I would appreciate if you stay on and complete the post assessment that will be in the next slide so that I can assess your growth after taking just a 1 hour course with me. I would truly appreciate a review. Leave me some information in the comments. What did you like about this? What left you wanting more? What was confusing? I am constantly growing and learning as an educator myself as well. So thank you guys for joining me today, and go reach the highest standard in teaching. At the highest standard, we address the overwhelming demands placed on teachers, especially those new to the profession or working through alternative certification. We provide engaging professional development and useful resources, all designed and created by teachers for teachers. Our offerings focus on streamlining lesson planning, saving time, and ensuring compliance with the TEKS essential knowledge and skills. By providing practical tools and support, we empower educators to focus on what really matters: student success. Whether you're an administrator aiming to support your team or a teacher looking for ways to improve classroom efficiency, the highest standard is your go-to solution for quality instruction, alignment to the standards, and teacher retention.